Well, Brian, it's funny because like we talk about the idea of these bands as if they're punching a clock and getting an hourly rate. Like every year, every month is very different from the last one, and we've been talking about a lot of different revenue streams that didn't even exist for a lot of these artists just months ago, years ago. So, how are the best of your clients able to navigate their sort of like the times when the revenue isn't what they were expected, or when all of a sudden now there's kids involved and now the expenses are bigger than what they were before? How do they navigate all that?
I think, well, obviously, like we said, every band's a different story. But what we try to do is, you try to plan everybody's lives out more or less 2 or 3 years in advance, because when you go through cycles of things, okay, here's our next 3-year cycle where we're going to tour this amount, we're going to make this record at this point, we're going to do this and this. So you have a pretty decent understanding of what's going to happen. And obviously, everybody chimes in about, what they think that, the tour is going to make and what the band's going to make on this and that. And obviously, we try to be we are very transparent in the amount of money that comes in for all these different things. Because, now there's actually real revenue coming in. We actually are giving bands, 6-figure checks again, which didn't happen for a long period of time. So it's a good thing to have. And we definitely tell everybody what's happening. And, our level is we work with the bands and kind of give them a bit of an indication of what's coming in on our level as much as we can. But you just have to plan everything out. And then, every time, every cycle is going to be different. Like, yeah, you'll have a guitar player like, hey, I'm having a kid, so I can't tour from this time to this time, and I'm going to need a little bit more money. So, you're always trying to figure out ways to make the band money. And our job, I think, more than anything else, is I look at us as like brand managers. We try to, we have a huge IT team, we have social media, we do all these things, and our job is to take all of our people and build the brand, which sounds super corporate and lame, but build the brand of the band as big as possible. And my attitude is like, look, if they're selling a ton of merchandise, or if they're selling huge amounts of concert tickets, we don't necessarily make money from that. That's fine. But if we build the brand up big enough, then eventually we'll get our little piece of it. And, record labels now play probably a more insignificant role now than 25 years ago, when every penny that the band made came from record company. And I kind of prefer the way it is now, where there's different revenue streams for bands, and we're hopefully 25 to 30% of that, and then they're making a lot of money elsewhere. We try to make the band make as much money as possible, because the more money the bands make, the happier they are, the longer they're going to be around, the more they're going to be creative and making good music. So that's kind of sort of what we're trying to do.
And Brian, I think you're underselling how significant your label is to your artists here, even today. So how do you balance for yourself as a business owner your need to have a calendar, record cycles that fall into certain times, versus the artists who might be like, look, man, we only got 2 months of runway, we need to get this next album out? How do you balance that?
Well, look, we tried for years to try to make it all work, where, we have one major album every 2 months, but artists are artists. And sometimes it comes up where we'll have 3 artists that are going to put out their record, big artists that are going to put out their record at the same time. But we'll be very honest and say, look, we can't really put out 3 big albums at the same time, but we can maneuver it this way, and maybe touring for one artist makes more sense for them to do it a little bit different than the other one. So we try to make it work for everybody, and I think our job again is to make sure that they're happy and comfortable with our decisions. And certainly every decision we make, we talk to the managers and the agents and the bands. And Tim and Biggie can certainly, we've worked with them enough over the years, can even talk more about that. About, hey, I want to put a record out this time. Well, it's not so good for me, but maybe because we have this other thing, maybe we can do it around here. It's just, but we all work together and make it work. And generally 95% of the time, everybody's on the same page and totally workable with all the solutions. And it's pretty rare that we've had a time when we're like, oh my God, there's too many things all at once and then nothing else. But that happens sometimes too. And as a label, so for example, let's say we have 6 big records coming out in a 4-month period, which is a lot. But then we don't have any major records for a 4-month period after that. So what we try to do is we have a gigantic catalog, which is the luckiness of us being around for 38 years. And we'll just, try to do a bunch of stuff with the catalog, reissues, vinyl, which also is good to help with, the bands that maybe aren't touring, to get them a little bit more income. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it.
Thank you very much. That's awesome information. Tim Bohr, can you talk a little bit about morale? I mean, the road is where morale, a good tour is great for morale. A bad tour can be crushing. How do you find how do your clients find a flow with morale in order to, extend and last long term?
Morale is probably the hardest at the beginning. Bands have to really kind of be willing to go out there and fight against the current to be recognized. And I think that is often the hardest conversations to have with the bands early on, because it's tiring and it doesn't feel like you're winning a lot of those times. And for the bands that are great, you just kind of have to encourage them to hang in there, that there will be a turn of momentum, and that hard work that they put in will turn into, it'll translate into people responding to them, and the momentum will come their way. And that's really part of the artist development game. And I think, morale later, has to do with listening to all the small details of a veteran band that's been out there and knows what that game is, knows how they operate with each other, and know, these things are going to make us not feel great after a long period of time. And if we can think about these things as part of the strategy in the program, we're going to be okay with the situation. And trying to balance the beginning to the end in that way is it's not really hard, but you have to pay attention to it, and you have to be willing to, care about the people that you're in business with, meaning the bands and the managers, and hear those things out and try and bake that into what we're trying to do. And morale is a big part of it. I mean, if you aren't being, aware of how the bands are feeling, from the small band to now they've built an audience, to now they've become a big band, and now they've been a big band and they've been around for a while. If you aren't paying attention to the morale through that process, they won't make it to that point. There's no question about it.
And Tim brings up a really great point here about morale too. And a lot of this times, when bands are out on the road, some bands have it difficult and others don't. And I think we've seen on our behalf, some of our young bands have been on the road with other bands, and maybe they've struggled and morale is bad because something's happened. But the other bands have been on the road who have been around for a while and say, hey, we went through this, it's going to be okay. And to give a quick shout out to one of the greatest human beings of all time, Andy Williams from Every Time I Die. He specifically, we had 2 instances where we had bands on the road with ETID where a couple of things that didn't go right for them. And Andy sat them down and said, look, this is going to happen. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And that, certainly made my life a lot easier. So, and that's a big thing out there too, because I think the older bands that same thing, our bands that headline do the same thing. You'll talk to the younger bands and say, hey, look, it'll be fine. We went through this. There's always ebbs and flows. So it's a big thing for morale, I think.
There's almost always, sorry, Brian, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but you're just saying something that really kind of triggers like a thought. There's always like this moment with a band that's starting to get somewhere where they almost break. It happens almost every time. And sometimes the bands actually don't make it through that process, but having people that have been around, whether it's the headliners or the managers or the agents or the label that have seen that moment happen before, and being able to coach them through that moment and get them to the other side, it takes a couple of brains and a couple of conversations to help artists get through that moment, for sure.
Yeah, and I was going to say with Tim, Tim Bohr, I mean, he was our agent for years, and you know, Tim, not to go on a personal tangent, and we can just start and stop this real quick, but like, I think one of the harder things from a longevity perspective is like recognizing how hard your team works, and then being the agent. Like, if we have the smallest show on a tour and we do 900 people in a 1700 cap room, like, we're pissed. And all of a sudden now it's like, call Randy, call Tim Borer. Why'd you put me in a 1500 cap room in St. Louis? You know, there's only 900 people here. And, you know, the proper response is, dude, there's 900 people in St. Louis. Like, chill out, right? And then on the adverse, you put up a 2500 cap room in LA and it goes in a day. And all of a sudden you're like, why didn't you put me in the 5,000 cap? Like, you're making me look like a fool here, and now you're losing me money over here. And you know, that's not my personal opinion, but those are the frustrations when your morale's down and you're having a terrible show. And the reality is, dude, there's 1,000 people here. It just happens to be in a 1700 cap room. And what your agent and manager missed was that, you know, last minute there was a radio show that got canceled. So 3 bands just your size took up the whole city, and now there's a mini South by Southwest and we're all splitting people. All it takes is a phone call to get a logical reason why this is happening. But in the moment when morale's down, like, as a manager or an agent or even a band member, someone has to be the cooler head. Because, you know, screw you, Tim Borer, screw you, Randy, well, screw you, Tim, tell Spencer to screw himself. And like, you know, Etid's on here and you told me they're worth 1,000 tickets, but they're worth 2 tickets. So screw Biggie. All of a sudden we're in this like chaos, and none of it's real. It's like a lack of morale mixed with no sleep, mixed with frustration. And all of a sudden I just want someone to blame, because there's no way my band that I spent my whole life building isn't worth this. Someone else messed up. Who do I get to lynch? And like, that's something that I see a lot of bands do a lot. And I'm sure Tim and Biggie, you can extrapolate on that from the admin side, but it's like, it's so hard to manage that. But like, as people that have all had decade-long relationships with labels, bands, you know, agent, manager, like, those things happen, and then you have to figure out a way to diffuse it. Or yeah, you pull the pin, and if you don't put the pin back in, it's gonna blow, and it's not gonna be good for anybody, you know?
Well,
You
Biggie,
just
got
have
to
to have perspective.